The sun was setting, casting warm shades of gold and crimson across the sky. The sea below as smooth and reflective as glass. There wasn't a whisper of wind or the slightest sound, just pure, undisturbed serenity. My yacht, Halcyon, sat anchored in a tiny bay off a rugged Greek rock island. The spot was secluded, a gem of isolation, small but perfect, with reliable anchorage and no sign of another soul. Securing the yacht hadn't been simple. The confined bay required a second mooring point, and the process had been tricky. Still, I didn't mind. After a lazy day sailing the Aegean, a bit of physical effort felt refreshing. With the hard work done, I could finally relax, cold beer in hand, basking in the silence. But, as usual, my peace didn't last. Thoughts of Rachel crept in, as they always did when I had nothing to distract me. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop the memories from surfacing. I rarely thought about the good times anymore. It was hard to trust those memories, anyway. Were they even real? For years, I'd believed I was lucky to have her. Now, I wasn't so sure. Her love, if that's what it was, had seemed sincere once. But looking back, it felt more like a performance, a role she played expertly. The anger bubbled up again, but I forced it down, focusing on the world around me. The sea, the sun dipping lower, even the pigeons circling lazily above. They were all distractions I clung to, desperate to quiet my mind. Even so, I couldn't sit still. Deciding to recheck the moorings, though unnecessary, gave me something to do. Without much thought, I dove into the water, the coolness shocking my senses and clearing my head, at least temporarily. Lately, it felt like rage was consuming me from the inside out, isolating me from everyone I cared about. My sister had warned me I was on a path to self-destruction, calling me a ticking time bomb. She wasn't wrong. So here I was, choosing solitude on a yacht over a cave, hoping it might save me from myself. Back on board, I busied myself with cooking, something simple to keep my hands moving. The act felt hollow, though. Rachel's disdain for the kitchen had always been a sore spot in our relationship, her absence now a glaring reminder of how little she'd contributed. I focused on making an omelet, enjoying the quiet solitude of this hidden bay. It was a public space, sure, but its remoteness made it feel like my private sanctuary. Dinner on the deck was peaceful. I watched the sun's final rays light up the cliffs in a warm, golden glow. The silence was all-encompassing, and for a brief moment, I felt at ease. Then, out of nowhere, the tranquility shattered. The low growl of an approaching motor reached my ears, growing louder by the second. I turned to see a massive yacht barreling toward the bay, music blaring obnoxiously loud. My peaceful evening was over. The approaching vessel was a monstrosity, a loud, gaudy party boat that didn't belong in this quiet paradise. As it got closer, a man in a black suit leaned over the railing and shouted, demanding that I move. Apparently, the yacht belonged to some fashion mogul named Donovan, and they wanted the place to themselves. I laughed at the absurdity. This was public property, and I wasn't going anywhere. I'd been here first, and I wasn't about to let some self-important stranger chase me off. When the shouting didn't work, the man tried offering me €1,000 to leave. I found it amusing and turned him down with a few choice words. Eventually, they gave up and anchored nearby, their ship lit up like a carnival. I decided to treat their antics as free entertainment. The people aboard were like caricatures, men strutting around like roosters, women tottering in bikinis and stilettos. On my yacht, heels were a hard no, but on their deck, it seemed to be the norm. The whole scene was ridiculous. The models, painfully thin, wandered about as if in a daze, while men in suits and uniformed crew stood at attention. Occasionally, someone would glance my way, their expression dripping with disdain. I didn't care. They could think whatever they wanted. To me, they were the absurd ones, parading their wealth and egos like badges of honor. Meanwhile, I sat quietly with my beer, perfectly content with my lot in life. Then, something unexpected happened. A commotion broke out on their deck. A woman, clearly upset, was arguing with a group of men. Donovan, easy to spot with his large frame, loomed over her, flanked by bodyguards. The tension was palpable, and for a moment, I thought things might turn violent. Then they noticed me watching. I raised my beer in a casual salute, and they quickly moved the argument inside. All except the woman. She was left alone, trapped on their boat, pleading with the others for help. They ignored her, their indifference chilling. Suddenly, she made a bold move. Before anyone could stop her, she leapt overboard, heels and all. The sight was shocking, but she landed gracefully, slicing through the water like a knife. For a moment, I admired the audacity. Then I realized she was swimming straight for me. I cursed under my breath. The last thing I needed was someone invading my space, especially a woman from their world. Spoiled, entitled, and bound to ruin my peace. Still, I couldn't send her back to those men. I wouldn't be able to live with myself. As she got closer, I felt the weight of her intrusion. Damn, a damsel in distress, heading straight for me. Just what I didn't need. Panic started to set in. It was too late to re-anchor now, and I couldn't exactly refuse her. She looked like she was in serious trouble. Fine, I'd let her board, but this was strictly temporary. I'd drop her off at the nearest port in the morning. As she swam up to the gangway, I leaned down to help her on board. Not that I was about to get chatty. Women and I didn't mix well, and I'd learned that the hard way. Keeping my distance felt like the safest bet. As soon as I decided that, I felt a little calmer. I wasn't going to let her, or anyone else, wreck the composure I'd spent months piecing back together. When she reached for my hand, I offered it without a word, helping her up onto the deck. She knew I'd seen the commotion on Donovan's yacht. My silence was enough to show her I was willing to help. But wait, she was still wearing heels as she stepped onto my teak deck. I gestured to her shoes, and thankfully, she got the message right away. "Oh, sorry," she said quickly, slipping them off. "My name's Clara, by the way." "Ethan," I replied, reluctantly. Damn it. Barely a minute in female company, and I was already fumbling. She extended her hand again, as if our first handshake hadn't counted. With a sigh, I shook it. Her grip felt firm but warm, a mix of gratitude and introduction. When she straightened up, she lingered just enough for me to acknowledge her presence in my space, giving me time to adjust to the intrusion. It was subtle but deliberate. Thoughtful, even. I had to wonder how someone with that kind of sensitivity had ended up on Donovan's yacht. Whatever her story was, I wasn't exactly eager to hear it. Clara was stunning, no question about that. She looked every bit the part of one of Donovan's guests. But she wasn't as young as I'd assumed. Early 20s, maybe a few years younger than me. Her beauty wasn't the fragile, malnourished kind I'd seen on the other women aboard that floating circus. She was slender but healthy, with striking features and eyes so vividly green they seemed unreal. Her damp hair clung to her shoulders, its color unclear but undeniably rich. Compared to her, Rachel seemed utterly ordinary. Out of my league, sure, but these days that didn't faze me. I'd made my peace with keeping women out of my life, and I intended to stick to it. Still, I couldn't help admiring her, the way I might admire a work of art or a rare flower. It didn't mean anything, at least, that's what I kept telling myself. When she caught me looking, her expression shifted, a flicker of insecurity passing over her face. That surprised me. Women like her weren't supposed to be timid. They were supposed to be bold, taking what they wanted without hesitation. Yet she seemed genuinely uncertain, like so much depended on my response. I grunted, making it clear I wasn't in the mood for conversation. She blinked at me, puzzled, but accepted the towel I handed her without comment. After a moment, she smiled, like she'd figured me out and decided I was just a grumpy sea dog. Honestly, she wasn't far off. Looking back at Donovan's yacht, I noticed him gesturing wildly, deep in conversation with his bodyguards. He seemed agitated, probably debating whether to come after her. Greek waters weren't lawless, and even someone like him couldn't get away with outright piracy. Still, I wouldn't put it past him to try. Men like Donovan didn't take no for an answer, whether it was over a business deal or a game of rock, paper, scissors. I wasn't about to let his nonsense disrupt my life. Clara had followed my gaze, her expression darkening. "I hope that fat fool doesn't send his goons after me," she murmured. "He might," I replied dryly. "He's got enough of them. Maybe we'll swim away tomorrow." She chuckled softly but didn't look reassured. Thanks again for helping me. I wasn't sure what else to do back there. They were just about to, her voice trailed off, but her meaning was clear. They? I asked before I could stop myself. She nodded. Donovan. His guests. His bodyguards. Even the crew. He made some stupid bet. Claimed he and all the other men could entertain every girl on board before the ship returned to Italy. Most of the girls didn't mind, or at least, they pretended not to, but I just couldn't do it. I've put up with a lot in this business, but today was too much. So, yeah, I said no to Fulvio Donovan, and now my career's probably over. But honestly? She exhaled, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Good riddance. For a moment, she seemed surprised by her own candor. I nodded, letting out another grunt, half sympathetic, half noncommittal. She shook her head, smiling faintly. For all the glamour, this whole fashion thing is just garbage. Maybe this is for the best. Time to try something new, right? Her optimism took me off guard. How could someone brush off losing everything like that? If only I had that kind of resilience. She laughed suddenly, a melodic sound that was both enchanting and maddening. Sorry, she said, wiping her face with the towel. It's just God. I'm starving. I've been hungry for 10 years. Guess that's part of the job? Without a word, I headed below deck to make her some scrambled eggs. She followed me, glancing around as I handed her a plate without much ceremony. This wasn't how I'd imagined my evening, but here I was, sharing my solitude with a woman I barely knew. It's harder than I expected to maintain my resolve with Clara around. Her presence is like a crack in the armor I've spent months fortifying, and it's unsettling. Still, I remind myself there's no use in getting attached. Letting my guard down won't lead to anything good of that, I'm certain. That looks delicious. Thanks, she says brightly as I hand her a plate of scrambled eggs. Do you live here all alone? I nod, keeping my response curt. The less I interact with her, the better. Her cheerful demeanor has a way of tugging at my resolve, and I can't afford to let her chip away at it. Do you have any clothes I could borrow? I didn't exactly have time to pack. She smiles again, and damn it, she's stunning. Begrudgingly, I head to the aft cabin and grab some old clothes. When I return, her smile hasn't faltered, and I can feel my scowl slipping. I hand her the bundle with a gruff, "Take one of the forward cabins." "Thank you," she replies, taking the clothes. "Are they all free?" Another nod. Why does she need to keep asking questions? What's a man like you doing out here all alone? And how do you keep the women away? She teases, her tone light and almost mischievous. What? I stare at her, bewildered, which only earns me another of her melodic laughs. Never mind, she says, clearly enjoying my confusion. I'm going to change. This wet bikini is getting cold. She walks off toward the forward cabins, leaving me standing there, stunned and annoyed. I find myself watching her retreat, noting she's as striking from the back as she is from the front. Shaking my head, I try to make sense of her earlier comment. Rachel's voice echoes in my mind. You're just an ordinary guy, nothing special. She always made sure I remembered that. And yet, here's Clara, a genuine model, joking about me having to fend off women. The absurdity of it makes me laugh bitterly. A few minutes later, she's back. Somehow, she's managed to make my old sweatpants and shirt look stylish. She moves with a confidence that's oddly appealing, but I quickly push that thought aside. You know, she says, I think you're trying too hard to seem grumpy. You might even have a friendly face under there. I almost smile but catch myself just in time. As her hair dries, revealing its rich brunette color, I silently scold myself for noticing. Would you mind if I stayed below deck? She asks, her voice quieter now. I'd rather not remind Fulvio that I'm here. I grunt in agreement, realizing how ridiculous I sound. She doesn't seem to mind and disappears below deck, leaving me alone. Finally, the next morning, I'm on deck early with my coffee, already feeling grouchy. It's a ritual, this brooding solitude in the crisp morning air, and I'm not keen on sharing it. Rachel still finds her way into my thoughts sometimes, but I've learned to accept the bitterness that comes with those memories. The quiet helps, at least until I hear movement below deck. Clara. Of course. She emerges from the hatch, somehow managing to look both refreshed and infuriatingly cheerful. Morning, she says with a soft smile. Morning, I reply, no doubt looking like I just crawled out of a storm. Coffee. Galley. She vanishes below again, and for a moment, I think she might actually leave me in peace. But soon, she's back, cup in hand, and she settles on the deck beside me. Her presence is surprisingly quiet, almost soothing, but I'm wary of how easily she's fitting into this space I've carved out for myself. The sea stretches endlessly before us, and for the first time, Rachel's shadow seems to fade. So, Clara breaks the silence, her tone light but her expression serious. What's the deal? You saved me. What do I owe you? Her words catch me off guard. Has everyone who's helped you wanted something in return? I ask, regretting the bluntness of it as soon as the words leave my mouth. She nods, her expression darkening. Pretty much. Well, your life must be pretty crappy then, I mutter, trying to keep the pity out of my voice. Yeah, she replies softly, the weight of the admission showing in her face. For a moment, she looks utterly miserable, and I don't know what to say. The silence hangs heavy between us. Eventually, I decide it's time to go. Donovan and his crew are likely to wake soon, and I'd rather be far away before they notice us. Is there anything you need from the ship before we leave? I ask, surprised by the gentleness in my tone. No, she says firmly, as though severing a tie to her old life. I nod and head to the galley, tidying up and preparing the yacht for departure. Clara stays by the rail, her gaze fixed on the sea. She doesn't offer to help, but somehow, she seems more respectful of my solitude than most would be. Starting the winch motor to retrieve the anchor is noisy and time-consuming, but necessary. Clara watches nervously as the noise grows louder, her eyes darting toward Donovan's yacht. I start the engine, hoping to get us out of earshot before anyone stirs. As we glide away from the bay, I see her visibly relax, her shoulders dropping like a weight's been lifted. For a moment, I feel it too. Unexpectedly, she appears even more stunning than I had anticipated. A vision of calm and contentment as she sits beside me while I steer. As Brian's boat disappears from sight, the monotonous hum of the diesel engine starts to grate on me. I decide to hoist the sails and kill the engine, welcoming the peaceful stillness that follows. The soft sounds of the wind, the rhythmic lapping of the waves, and the gentle creaking of the sails create a serene harmony. After securing the sails, I return to the helm, enveloped once again by a soothing silence. I steal a few glances in her direction. She seems utterly at ease, staring out to the open sea. With Brian no longer in view, her relaxed demeanor feels almost disarming, as if she's completely unbothered by anything in the world. I can't help but find it curious. She hardly looks like someone who just walked away from an enviable career. If Rachel were in her place, not that she ever would be, she'd be restless, demanding, probably lecturing me about something. But Clara? She's an enigma. Then again, maybe, no, I catch myself. Or could it be that Clara sees me the same way Rachel once did? Perhaps she believes I owe her the lifestyle she's used to just because I allowed her aboard. That could explain why she seems so composed. Damn it, I sigh inwardly. Here I go again. The old adage rings true. Invite a woman into your life and kiss your peace of mind goodbye. I glance at her, and she turns her head away, gazing innocently at the sparkling water beyond the rail. She looks completely unaware. Or is it an act? I remind myself she used to be a model. Models are trained to wear any mask they choose. My eyes flick back to the sails, then to the starboard side. What's her angle? My spiraling thoughts are interrupted when she says something unexpected. Wait, how does she know about that? I blink at her, caught off guard. Well, there goes the nearly perfect morning. Now she's ruining it. Just a regular guy, I tell myself. Sure, a good-looking, affluent guy sailing solo on a sleek yacht. But that's all. Handsome? She thinks I'm handsome? That's her first misstep. She clearly needs an eye exam. Something we should definitely discuss at some point. But not now. I take a deep breath, trying to mask my thoughts. She's perceptive, though. Too perceptive. Am I that obvious? I blurt. She giggles in response, and I can't help but chuckle along. Damn it. She's already broken through my defenses. I decide to play along. What's my next move? She blushes faintly, catching me off guard again. You try so hard to stay distant and quiet, she says, her voice soft but firm. She takes a breath and looks me directly in the eyes. There's a determined glint in her gaze, though it's softened by something that might be sympathy. Or am I imagining it? You've been hurt, she continues, her voice steady. Badly. So now you keep everyone at a distance because you're scared of being hurt again. That's natural. Even animals do it. But at some point, you have to stop retreating and start living again. I remain silent, unsure whether to respond. Her words hit uncomfortably close to home. When you isolate yourself, she adds, you're just keeping your pain company. Every time you avoid people and dwell on what happened, you let those old wounds fester instead of healing. And no one can even offer you compassion, because you've cut yourself off from the world. Her words linger in the air as I wrestle with them. Am I truly just brooding? I was married once, I finally admit, hoping to steer the conversation away from me. To my childhood best friend. It all fell apart when she cheated. In the end, all she cared about was the money. I pause, watching her expression. So yeah, I'm cautious. Especially with women. I expect my admission to halt her questioning, but it doesn't. I'm sorry, she says softly. I figured it was something like that. But you're letting her win. You're still letting her control you, even now. That's no way to live. At some point, you'll have to face it. Burying it won't work forever. And who better to talk to than someone you'll never see again? Her insight surprises me. It's clear she's not flirting, and for once, I can't think of a witty retort. Don't worry, she says with a small smile. I know you'll leave me at the next port. Your secrets are safe with me. She pauses. How about I share my story? I hesitate. If she shares her story, it means she won't be digging into mine any further. But what if her experience was worse than mine, and she handled it better? That thought unsettles me. Before I can decide, she interrupts my thoughts. Her grin is like that of a mischievous child, infectious and disarming. I almost return it but catch myself in time. No attachments, I remind myself. Don't let her reel you in. Too late. She's still smiling, and I've already let my guard slip. Her expression turns serious, her gaze shifting to the horizon. When she speaks again, her voice is calm, almost detached. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew me, she begins. There were smarter kids, more talented kids, but everyone believed I'd be the one to succeed. You know, when all you have is your looks, the obvious path is modeling. She pauses, her eyes reflecting a quiet sadness. But when I got there, I realized I was at the bottom of the food chain. No one cared about who I was or what I'd done. For the first time, people told me I wasn't good enough, over and over, in the harshest ways imaginable. She glances at me briefly, as if seeking understanding. It's one thing to be told your work isn't good enough. It's another to hear that you, as a person, aren't good enough. That kind of rejection, it breaks you. Turning her attention back to the sea, she adds, like a lot of models, I began to see my body as something separate from me, a tool to be maintained. I did everything right, exercise, diet, discipline, but it was never enough. No matter what I did, I was never the one they picked. I began noticing how directors favored certain girls, those who socialized with them or their superiors. Socializing, I soon realized, often meant something more intimate. It didn't matter if the directors were male or female. The expectation was the same. At first, I resisted. But after months of unemployment, desperation set in, and I relented. Surprisingly, it wasn't always awful. Some were kind, even considerate. By then, I'd already detached from my body. It felt more like a tool than a part of me, something I used to secure work. Eventually, I got jobs, and my hometown celebrated seeing me in ads and catalogs. Their pride was suffocating. I carried the weight of their hopes and dreams on my shoulders. I knew I'd never reach the top, and I hated the life I was living, but I kept going. Strangely, I I began to sympathize with women trapped in abusive relationships. I don't know what finally broke me. Maybe it was a bet or a joke, but on one of Bryony's cruises, I'd had enough. I hid in my cabin until his men dragged me out. The rest, well, you know. She pauses, meeting my eyes. They didn't think I'd jump, she says. Maybe I wouldn't have, but your boat was nearby, and I overheard your argument with Bryony. It gave me courage. Her voice trembles slightly. Last night, I was terrified he'd send his men after me. But then I realized I was just another disposable pretty face to them. Oddly, that brought me relief. She smiles, as if amused by her own defiance, and I smile back, trying to lift her spirits. I'm done with all of it, she continues. The village will have to find someone else to celebrate. So what if I'm broke and jobless? I've been here before and survived. But I'll never sell my body again, or let others define my worth. Whatever's next, it'll be on my terms. Her grin is radiant, and for a moment, I'm struck by how captivating she is. So, do you think I'm a courtesan? She teases, her eyes sparkling mischievously. I stumble through a response, and she laughs. A sound so infectious I can't help but chuckle too. You know, she says, in a strange way, I've been like a maid. My body was just a tool for others. Sure, sometimes there was pleasure, but I never made love. My heart was never involved. Her expression softens. All I ever wanted was what my mother had. A simple life, a loving partner, a home filled with warmth. For a while, I lost sight of that. But not anymore. Her determination stirs something in me, and I excuse myself to fetch 2 glasses of chilled Sauvignon Blanc. When I return, we toast to her future. As we talk, I realize it's not just her beauty that draws me. It's her resilience and honesty. Hoping to shift focus, I decide to share my story. You want to hear about me? I ask. Yes, she replies with a smile. Of course. Am I really that transparent? I joke. Completely, she teases. But I still want to hear it. I take a deep breath and begin. I met Rachel on my first day of school. She was being bullied, so I stepped in to defend her. From that day on, we were inseparable. She helped me with schoolwork, and I protected her. Money didn't matter then. We were just kids. I pause, unsure if I should continue, but Clara's encouraging expression pushes me on. As we grew older, Rachel blossomed into this stunning beauty. Suddenly, she didn't need me chasing off boys anymore. Despite how close we were, people, including my mom, said she was out of my league. Clara gasps. Your mom said that? That's awful. Maybe, I admit, but it stuck with me. She must have been mistaken, Clara says firmly. Don't let her words define you. Careful, I warn lightly. That's my mother you're talking about. Clara laughs, and I can't help but join in. Rachel and I went to the same university. I continue. She reached out, saying she missed feeling safe with me. For the first time, she hinted I might actually have a chance with her. I proposed, and she said yes. But the happiness didn't last. I hesitate, the memory still raw. I came home one night to find her in bed with another man. I didn't confront them. I just walked into my office and stayed there until they left. She came to me later, crying, apologizing, and swearing it was a one-time mistake. I forgave her because I couldn't imagine life without her. Clara studies me carefully. So you forgave her? Yes, I say. But it wasn't long before I realized she hadn't changed. She kept breaking her promises. Clara frowns. Did she have money when you married? No. Why? You mentioned she went after your money post-divorce, Clara points out. Maybe she felt insecure. Or dependent. It could have been her way of shifting the balance of power. I stiffen slightly. Are you defending her? Not at all, Clara replies. What she did was inexcusable. But understanding her motives might help you move forward. You can't heal if you're still trapped in her shadow. Her words hit closer to home than I'd like to admit. How do you know so much? I ask, feigning sarcasm. I don't, she says softly. I just understand. She looks at me expectantly. I take another deep breath and continue. It was supposed to be a quiet night in. A friend had tipped Rachel off that I wasn't going out. When I came home, the apartment was filled with candles and soft music. I thought it was a romantic surprise. But when I walked into the bathroom, I found her there. She was in the tub, laughing and kissing another man in the bubbles. I pause, the memory still sharp. They didn't even look guilty. When they turned to see me standing there, they just smiled. Carl, the man with Rachel, greeted me as though nothing about the situation was unusual. He was calm, even warm, as if his presence in my home, in my marriage, were completely acceptable. I stood frozen, the absurdity of the moment sinking in. My marriage, my trust, and the love I thought was unshakable. All of it crumbled. Fighting back tears, I struggled to process the betrayal before me. Rachel, completely unfazed, reassured me in a tone that felt more patronizing than comforting. "Ethan," she began, "this doesn't change anything. I still love you. Carl and I both do." Her words hit me like a slap, yet she said them with such conviction it was as if she truly believed them. "I've realized I love two men," she continued matter-of-factly. "Carl's accepted it, and I know you will too. You'll see how happy we all can be." Stunned, I could barely speak. Rachel went on, "I'll still be with you most of the time. But now that you know, I'll spend some nights with Carl when you're out with your friends. You won't even notice. And don't worry, when we start a family, Carl will use protection so the kids will be yours. Right, Carl?" She turned to him, and he nodded eagerly. Her audacity was staggering. "What about your promise to be faithful?" I finally managed to ask. "Oh, that," she said, waving it off. "I guess I was a bit quick to promise. Besides, I hadn't met Carl yet. Don't be dramatic, Ethan. Think logically. Carl and I have been seeing each other for 2 months. Has your love for me changed? No. In fact, you've enjoyed better intimacy with me since I've been with Carl. He's different, spontaneous, unpredictable. But you're still the better lover because you know me so well." I stared at her, barely able to believe what I was hearing. "What if I don't agree?" I asked, my voice low and shaking. Her smile faltered, replaced by an edge of annoyance. "Ethan, I hate to say this, but if you divorce me, I'll have no choice but to protect myself and Carl. I'll make sure I get at least half of everything you own." She softened her tone as if that would make it better. "Remember, I've loved you since we were kids. The choice is simple. Keep what we have, or risk losing me and half your assets." Her words were laced with manipulation, and she delivered them with an air of confidence that made my blood boil. Carl chimed in, inviting me to join them, and Rachel, in a final display of mockery, playfully blew water at me before kissing him on the nose. That was the last straw. "I'm done," I said, turning on my heel and walking away. I packed a bag, my mind racing with anger and disbelief. At a hotel that night, the full weight of what had happened crushed me. I cried, cursed, and pounded the mattress, my world unraveling. By morning, something shifted inside me. Rachel was no longer the woman I loved. She was my adversary. From then on, my priority became protecting myself, not because I needed the money, but because I refused to let her profit from her betrayal. Luckily, my grandfather's trust fund shielded me. He'd set it up so I received an allowance until age 40 or after my first divorce, when the full fortune would become mine. Legally, I owned almost nothing, which meant Rachel had little claim to my wealth. I consulted a family lawyer, who assured me the worst-case scenario was a brief period of minimal alimony. Confident, I moved to a new apartment and began the divorce process. Rachel didn't contact me for a week, then sent a casual message asking if I'd gotten over my hurt feelings and was ready to come home. I didn't respond. 2 weeks later, her tone changed. Her lawyer must have told her the truth about my finances. Suddenly, Rachel bombarded me with messages, oscillating between declarations of love, claims of misunderstanding, and demands that I be brave, like Carl. She even argued, Carl accepted it. Why can't you? Her attempts grew desperate. She fabricated a post-nuptial agreement claiming I'd promised her $20,000 a month for life. Handwriting experts easily disproved it. Then she accused me of domestic violence, but the case fell apart for lack of evidence. Ultimately, she settled for what we proposed, $2,000 a month for a year and legal fees. On paper, I'd won. In reality, I felt hollow. The ordeal left me distrustful of relationships, retreating into isolation to shield myself from further pain. "I'm leaving," I said suddenly, breaking the silence. Clara didn't respond right away. When I looked at her, I saw tears streaming down her face. Her expression was soft but resolute. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," she said quietly. "You've been through so much." Strangely, sharing my story seemed to lighten the burden I'd carried for so long. Clara wiped her tears, her voice steady as she spoke. "Ethan, you can't live like this. Rachel didn't care about your happiness, and by letting her destroy you, you're giving her power she doesn't deserve. You have to live again. Don't let her define your future." Her words struck a nerve, and I flinched at the truth of them. Clara's determination cut through my defenses, leaving me speechless. As silence filled the air, I realized something had shifted. Perhaps it was time to reclaim my life. "So, you're a hermit?" Clara's playful smile returns, her eyes sparkling. "Yeah, I suppose so," I admit. "Yesterday, I might have embraced that label. Today, I'm not so sure." "At least you're not one of those bushy-bearded types," she teases. "Thankfully, no," I reply. "Promise me you'll move past this soon. You need to start living again, Ethan," she urges, her gentle tone striking a chord in me. Speechless, I nod. Satisfied, she shifts the conversation. "Good. Now that's settled, I'll catch some sun," she says, flashing a teasing smile as she heads to the bow. I watch her settle near the mast, using my sweatpants as a cushion. Her effortless beauty is captivating, but there's more to her than meets the eye. Her empathy feels genuine, and she's made me confront truths I've avoided for years. I wonder if she's psychic, or just perceptive. How can someone who's known me for less than a day understand me so well? Her courage to leave her past behind, even dramatically, is infectious. I start questioning my own self-imposed isolation. Watching Clara embrace life despite uncertainty makes me wonder, if I'm allowing Rachel's betrayal to destroy me, how different is it from staying in that toxic cycle? Yet, as I glance at Clara's carefree presence, my fears of living again seem to fade. Her smooth belly and nearly exposed curves distract me, and I quickly look away, only for her to catch me despite her sunglasses. "Where are we going?" she asks casually. "Naxos," I reply. "So, this is where you were going to leave me?" she smirks, rolling onto her back and removing her sunglasses. "No, I mean, I wasn't planning to," I stammer, flustered. She laughs. "Sorry, Ethan. I shouldn't tease. I just miss having someone to have fun with." I smile, willing to forgive her anything. Yet, a nagging voice reminds me of Rachel's manipulations. Before I can dwell on it, Clara's tone softens. "I'm not like that, Ethan," she says, reading my unease. "So, I'll leave the boat on Naxos?" I ask tentatively. "Not unless you want to," she replies. "I like having you around, but you can stay as long as you want." She smiles, clearly enjoying my stuttering attempts at a reply. I take a deep breath and shift gears. "I was stopping there anyway for supplies. You might want to get some clothes." "That's the plan," she says, then strikes a dramatic pose. "What's the matter, sailor? Not enjoying the view?" She laughs at my flustered reaction, then grows serious. "Ethan, I don't have money or debit cards. I might not be able to pay you back right away." I pretend to think, approaching her with mock seriousness. "Maybe I'll find a way for you to repay me." Her apprehensive expression makes me grin. "How are your knots?" I ask. "What's with the knots?" she asks, her voice trembling slightly. "Sailor's knots. Halcyon doesn't sail herself. Since you're here, you might as well help." I smile. She laughs, slapping my arm. "You got me!" she exclaims, her laughter infectious. We sit together on the foredeck, the sun warming the deck as I teach her some basic knots. She picks them up quickly, her curiosity genuine. It's hot, so I remove my shirt, and we exchange occasional glances and smiles. Her presence is disarming, and for the first time in a long while, I feel completely at ease around a woman. Later, she helps me trim the sails, her athleticism surprising me. Watching her move is a pleasure, but it's clear she's more than just grace. She's sharp and adaptable. Together, We unmoor Halcyon, drawing envious glances from the waterfront. If I once thought she was just a pretty face, I now know better. When we reach Naxos, she borrows my sweatpants, and we head into town. Our first stop is the bank, where, as expected, she can't access her accounts without proper identification. Using my funds, she shops for clothes, simple sundresses, shorts, and tops, asking my opinion on footwear. Her choices are tasteful and practical, far from the indulgence I'd anticipated. While she shops for undergarments, I gather groceries and supplies. By the time we meet at the town square, we're both laden with purchases. She swapped my sweatpants for a light sundress, and I can't help but stare. She notices, laughing, her joy infectious. Surely, half of Naxos envies me right now. Back on the boat, we store our supplies and relax. Every time I think I've grown accustomed to her beauty, Clara surprises me with a new look or demeanor that leaves me stunned. "Thank you, Ethan," she says sincerely. "I'll repay you when I access my savings." "Maybe hold on to them until you've found a job," I suggest. "Well, maybe," she replies, smiling softly, "but I don't like owing my friends." Her words warm me unexpectedly. "We're friends," she reiterates. "Friends help each other, like you did for me last night, even when you didn't want to." We both know she's right. Friends don't hurt each other. Her gaze softens. "And no matter what, Ethan, I won't hurt you. Never." Her sincerity leaves me speechless. For the first time in a long while, I feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I can begin to trust again. "You know," Clara begins with a playful smile, "we're at ease with each other. I can't remember the last time I felt this comfortable with a man. No expectations, no pressure, just friends." Her voice softens, and she seems lost in thought for a moment. "When was that, I wonder?" she muses, glancing at me. Her words linger, resonating in a way I can't quite articulate. I shrug, unsure how to respond. She meets my eyes again, her expression curious. "You're comfortable with me too," she continues, her tone light yet somehow serious. "And one more thing. Do you know how I always seem to know what you're thinking? How is it I can read you so well?" I smirk, trying to deflect. "You tell me," I reply, pretending to be disappointed. "I was hoping you could do that with everyone, and we could rule the world together." She laughs, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "I wish," she says, shaking her head. "But no, it's just you. Maybe that's why we get along so well." Her gaze lingers on me, and I feel a strange mix of ease and nervousness. "So, friend," she says finally, "what's the plan for tonight?" "Well, friend," I reply, the words slipping out naturally, surprising us both. It feels fitting, though. "I'm not much of a planner." "Good," she says, her lips curving into a mischievous grin. "Because I've got one, and it's perfect. You're taking me ashore to that seafood spot we saw earlier, and we're going to have a wonderful dinner." "And then?" I ask, intrigued by her confidence. "Then we'll come back to the boat, and I'll fill you in on the rest of the plan," she replies cryptically, her smile widening. Dinner at the small seafood restaurant is an experience I hadn't expected to enjoy as much as I do. At first, I worry Clara might feel out of place in such a humble setting, but she's completely at ease, her charm drawing smiles even from the staff. The restaurant has a cozy, welcoming atmosphere, and the food is excellent, fresh seafood paired with casual yet lively conversation. Despite the curious glances we attract, Clara is unbothered, her confidence disarming even the most curious eyes. The owner stops by our table several times, not out of intrusion but genuine hospitality, making us feel like old friends. Clara's warmth shines through, and I find myself laughing more than I have in months. For a while, I forget my worries entirely. After dinner, we stroll along the waterfront. The lights reflect on the calm water, creating a tranquil atmosphere. At some point, Clara slips her hand into mine, and it feels natural, as though it's always been there. Back on the boat, she leans in close, her kiss soft but full of emotion. "Thank you," she whispers, her voice trembling slightly. "I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a night this much." She turns away briefly, as if to compose herself, but I catch the faint glisten of tears in her eyes. When she looks back at me, she's smiling again, her playful side resurfacing. "So," she says, her tone teasing, "are you ready for the rest of the plan?" "Yeah, I suppose," I reply cautiously. "Sure about that?" she asks, arching an eyebrow. Her earlier words echo in my mind. "Promise me you'll start living again, Ethan." I take a deep breath and nod. "Okay, I'm game. What's the deal?" "Is this where you seduce me?" she asks suddenly, her grin widening. The question catches me so off guard that I stammer incoherently. "Seduce? What?" She laughs, clearly enjoying my discomfort. "Relax, Ethan. Lovemaking isn't on the agenda," she says, her tone warm but teasing. Then, with a sudden seriousness, she adds, "We're going to make love." Her words land with a quiet weight. They're not a suggestion or a request. They're a simple, heartfelt statement. Her expression softens as she continues. "Ethan, you could have anyone. Why me?" The vulnerability in her voice disarms me. "We're falling for each other. Haven't you noticed?" she says gently. "Ethan, I'm not Rachel. I could never hurt you like she did." Her sincerity shakes me. Before I can respond, she grabs my shirt and pulls me closer, her lips meeting mine in a kiss that's unlike anything I've experienced. It's not just passion, it's connection. When we part, I notice tears in her eyes, and to my surprise, I feel my own dampen as well. She smiles, her fingers still clutching my shirt. Then, without a word, she leads me toward the quarters. The urgency in her movements leaves no doubt about her intentions. "You're beautiful," I manage to say, still reeling from the intensity of the moment. Her gaze softens. "Ethan, it's not about money or status. Using someone for wealth disgusts me." Her voice is calm but firm, and I believe her. "I'd sign anything, prenup, postnup, whatever you want." I chuckle nervously. "A prenup? Why not?" "You never know," I joke, trying to lighten the mood. Her sly grin returns. "Exactly. Just in case we tie the knot someday," she teases. Despite myself, I can't help but laugh. The next morning, our conversation turns to practicalities. "The home port of this ship is Antibes," I tell her. "From there, we can figure out the next steps." "Do you have a car there?" she asks. "Yeah, an old SUV," I reply. "We could drive to Milan, grab my things, and maybe head to Germany." "That works. It's practically on the way," she agrees. Her enthusiasm makes me smile. The 4 weeks it takes to sail back to Antibes are like a dream. Days are filled with sunbathing, laughter, and lovemaking. Nights are spent under the stars, talking about everything except the future or our pasts. We live in the moment, savoring every second. When we finally reach Antibes, packing up the boat feels like the end of an era. We load up my car in silence, both hesitant to break the spell of the past few weeks. The drive to Milan and then Germany is tense, the reality of the outside world creeping back in. Unspoken fears loom between us. I'm terrified of losing her, and she seems distant, her thoughts unreadable. Back in my apartment, the spark we shared on the yacht feels dimmer, replaced by an uneasy tension. As the weight of the real world presses down on us, I can't help but wonder if the connection we forged at sea can survive beyond the water. Despite the closeness we'd shared over the past weeks, I could feel a subtle strain building between Clara and me. I wasn't sure if it was the abrupt shift from the idyllic life aboard the yacht to the realities of my apartment, or something deeper. Sitting on the couch, Clara snuggled against me, her warmth and presence a stark reminder of her allure. As I contemplated retreating to the bedroom with her to reconnect, the doorbell shattered the moment. Clara stiffened beside me, her usual reaction to such interruptions. She still refused to answer the door or phone while in my apartment, a behavior that, though understandable, was starting to bother me. It was a sign that she wasn't entirely comfortable here yet, that something still felt out of place for her. "All right, Clara," I said, trying to mask my frustration as I stood. "I'll get it." "Thank you," she murmured, her voice soft. I opened the door, and my heart dropped into my stomach. There she was, Rachel, the woman who had once torn my life apart. She was dressed impeccably, exuding a polished confidence that felt both stunning and sinister. "Oh, honey," "You finally arrived," she exclaimed, stepping forward as though we were picking up right where we'd left off years ago. Her arms reached for me in a mock embrace, but I stepped back instinctively, my stomach churning. Unfazed by my cold reception, Rachel smiled, her eyes scanning me. Don't you look radiant," she said, her tone dripping with feigned sweetness. "Been soaking up the sun?" "Thank you," I replied flatly, unsure of what else to say. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" she pressed, tilting her head with calculated charm. Before I could formulate a response, Clara's voice came from behind me. "Please come in, Rachel," she said firmly, surprising both of us. Reluctantly, I stepped aside, allowing Rachel to enter. "Thank you," Rachel said smoothly as she walked past me. Her gaze landed on Clara, sharp and appraising. "And you are?" she asked, her voice laced with condescension. "I'm Clara," she replied evenly. "I'm aware," Rachel responded, her tone icy. The room instantly became charged with tension. Their words, though polite on the surface, carried a razor-sharp edge. It felt like standing between two duelists preparing for battle. "Please, have a seat, Rachel," Clara said, gesturing toward the couch. "Thank you," Rachel replied stiffly, her body language anything but relaxed. The silence that followed was deafening. "So, you're a friend of Ethan's?" Clara began, her tone casual but pointed. "I'm his girlfriend," Rachel declared, her words landing like a grenade. Clara's eyes narrowed. "Getting paid for this?" Rachel's tone turned accusatory, her gaze dripping with insinuation. "Are you implying I'm a courtesan?" Clara shot back, her voice calm but deadly. Rachel smirked. "Oh, let's not be too hard on ourselves. You're not unattractive, and Ethan is quite wealthy. I wouldn't suspect outright prostitution, but perhaps some sort of escort service?" Clara didn't flinch. "No, I wouldn't intrude on your delusions," she replied coolly. Rachel's eyes flashed. "So, you're not with him for his money? That's hard to believe." "Absolutely not," Clara asserted. "It's true there was a misunderstanding during his divorce, but I'm here because I love him." "Me too," Rachel retorted. "Let's face it, honey. Ethan's a decent guy, but he's out of your league in terms of looks. I don't buy for a second that you're here for love." Clara's lips curled into a defiant smile. "Let's talk about leagues. I may not be a supermodel, but I know who I am. Ethan's more than just a handsome face. He's kind, honest, and loyal. A rare find." Rachel's eyes narrowed further. "If he proposed, I'd marry him without hesitation." "Really?" I asked, caught off guard by the confession. "Yes," Rachel said, her voice softening slightly. "I'd sign any prenup. I just want him back." Clara scoffed. "You're just after his money. Don't act like it's anything else." Rachel's expression turned icy. "You don't understand, do you? I've been waiting for this moment, hoping Ethan would realize where he truly belongs." "Rachel," I said, my voice steady as I stood, "you're not needed here." "Ethan, don't do this," Rachel pleaded, her mask of confidence slipping. Ignoring her, I turned to Clara, my heart racing. "Clara, will you?" I began, my voice catching. Clara's eyes widened, and she looked at me, stunned. "Yes," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Rachel's grip on my shoulder tightened. "Ethan, don't. You're making a mistake." I shrugged her off gently, my focus solely on Clara. "Clara, please marry me," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Yes," she said again, her voice firm this time as she leapt into my arms. "Yes, Ethan. 1,000 times yes." Rachel stood frozen, her face a mixture of shock and fury. "You'll regret this," she spat. "Ethan, I could have been so good for you." "You're wrong, Rachel," I said calmly. "The best thing you've ever done for me is walking through that door today. I forgive you, but this is the end." Rachel hesitated, her anger simmering. "Goodbye, Ethan," she said finally, turning and walking toward the door. Her heels clicked against the floor, each step echoing through the room. She paused briefly, as if expecting me to stop her, but I didn't. As the door closed behind her, I turned to Clara, overwhelmed by the moment. "I thought I'd lose you," I admitted. You're not losing me, she said softly, her arms wrapping around me. Not now, not ever. We retreated to the bedroom, leaving the tension of the encounter behind. For the first time, I felt free from Rachel's shadow and the pain she'd caused. Clara had become my anchor, my future, and I knew then that I'd found the happiness I'd been searching for all along.